Hi, this is Scott Amyx, and today I'm joined by Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, who is the VP of Environmental Justice, Climate, and Community Revitalization for the National Wildlife Federation. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so Mustafa, for you, social and environmental justice was very important to you, even at a young age. I believe you joined the EPA at the age of 16. So the question is, what prompted you to join? And then eventually you ended up working at the EPA for some 24 years.
Yeah, well, I never thought in a million years that I would work for the federal government, but I was really blessed. I met someone by the name of Dr. Warren Banks and Dr. Clarice Gaylord, and the issue of environmental equity was getting started at that time, and I had been working on social justice issues and worker rights issues, and seeing an opportunity to actually be able to help the communities that I come from and that I knew were being impacted by a number of issues, was a great intersection point for me getting engaged in the work that was beginning at the federal government at that time.
Yeah. Now, tell us kind of, maybe a highlight or two. Again, you've been there for a long time before you transitioned to other things. What were some of the key highlights or things that you felt that you contributed to?
Yeah, well, we were really blessed because there were a set of recommendations that actually frontline leaders had given to the administrator at that time, things that they knew were super important in actually building the foundation to help communities to be in a better place, to be in a more sustainable place, to actually protect their lives. So we were able to create a number of various grant programs that have provided, now millions of dollars to frontline communities and others to build the capacity inside of their organizations to get the information and the science that was necessary to actually be able to themselves go out and educate folks. So I was really proud to be a part of that, to be a part of the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council, because if we're going to win on these issues, we need to be able to bring a lot of different types of folks together, both folks in business and industry and grassroots organizations, tribal organizations, state and local governments, and faith-based organizations. So being able to be a part of the creation of that was, just very inspiring and also just one of those phenomenal opportunities. But one of the other ones was being a part of the creation of Executive Order 12898 that President Clinton signed, that many people label as the Environmental Justice Executive Order, because that one actually got the United States federal government to understand that this was not just an Environmental Protection Agency issue, but 17 federal agencies have a responsibility for environmental justice and climate justice, actually, which we began to evolve into now in the later years. But some of those things, but, also watching, since I started as a student, watching all these student organizations also begin to get traction and to play a small role in that has just been incredible.
Yeah, terrific. It sounds like you've been involved in some of the really foundational work that has kind of set the tone for where we are today. And of course, you're focusing on the justice side, but the other part of it, especially when it comes to kind of domestic policy, is that climate change also has a defense and homeland security issue as well.
Oh, without a doubt. Some of the most egregious behaviors have happened on sort of the defense side, and getting them to have a better understanding of the role that they have to play in helping to protect communities and helping them to clean up some of the impacts that have been going on. And then you raise another very important part. Lots of times we don't necessarily recognize the homeland security aspect of this. So if you look at where most of the tier 2 targets are, those petrochemical facilities, or waste treatment facilities, those are a homeland security issue and they have to be protected. But we also, on the flip side of that coin, have to understand how they can impact communities and work hand in hand with both those folks who are working at Homeland Security and the Department of Defense.
Yeah, terrific. And before you mentioned grassroots organization, I believe you were involved with a Hip Hop Caucus. Maybe you could share a little bit about what that is, and then we'll transition to talk about your current role.
Yeah, no, the Hip Hop Caucus, incredible organization founded by Lennox Yearwood, Reverend Lennox Yearwood. They're just now celebrating their 15th anniversary. And it is a part of, and I give Rev all the credit for having the vision all those years ago of understanding the power of culture, understanding the power of art and activism, and merging those together. and all the incredible artists who are a part of both voting issues, which are extremely important. Also, if we're going to win on environmental and climate issues, people have got to vote. They've got to get engaged in the civic process, and also on the environmental and climate side. So when you have incredible artists like Common or Beyonce or Anthony Smith or Vic Mensa or 2 Chainz and others that your viewers will probably be familiar with, and they are sharing why these issues are important. They are utilizing their platforms to actually help to build bridges between communities. The beauty of art is that it connects people. Sometimes we may not even speak the language of the art that we are listening to or looking at, but it still touches us in a special way. And sometimes when we are working on some of these other issues, you sometimes get folks caught up in the, sort of the design and implementation and enforcement and accountability. Music takes that to a whole different place where people are just connecting and wanting things to be better and make change happen.
Yeah, I think you're actually making a really powerful point, which is that sometimes, even though we think that we're logical, rational human beings, and certainly we do ingest facts and data, at the end of the day, what moves us, especially when it comes to moving us towards action, is our heart. And music and culture and artistic forms are actually, in some ways, actually even more powerful as a medium for us to actually do so.
Without a doubt. I often joke with folks when I'm out speaking around the country, around the planet now, that I'm blessed to know probably now close to 1,000 of the top scientists around the planet. And if they say something, we have a handful of folks who pay attention. But when Beyonce says something, literally millions and millions of people began to pay attention to it. And that's what we want folks to do. Just pay attention. And then we can utilize the great scientists and other thinkers that we have to take them deeper and help them to understand the fullness of what's going on. And that's the beauty of those partnerships. When we have folks like the Union of Concerned Scientists, the Thriving Earth Exchange, and others coming together, working with these artists and entertainers and policymakers, we can actually win on these issues. We can make real change happen, and we can touch everyone across the planet and honor their culture and their visions for the future.
So let's briefly touch upon your current role at the National Wildlife Federation, and then let's get into more kind of your recommendation around policy changes as well as things that we can actually take into consideration on a daily life.
Sure. I mean, I'm really blessed to be the vice president over at NWF right now. It's one of the largest nonprofits in the United States. It's got 6 million members, focusing on many of the issues that all of us have always been caring about, water quality issues, climate change, also our public lands. And, that plays a huge role in the changes that we need to make, especially on the agriculture side and some of the other things. And they do a number of other things, of course, around wildlife. So being able to touch a whole new audience of conservationists, it is super important as we build this army for change, making sure that everybody's in the process, nobody is forgotten, and helping folks to understand the various perspectives from different types of folks who are, connected and working on these issues. So that's great. And then on the policy side, we've got some real opportunities in front of us. All of us hopefully have now read the IPCC report, the National Climate Assessment Report, and some of the ones that have just come out recently over the last couple of weeks about the challenges that are in front of us. But we can utilize policy. We can move to net zero, making sure that we are no longer dependent on carbon and some of the fossil fuels that are drivers in many of our societies and the work that we do. We can make sure that we are putting forward policies that are focused on renewable energy, but also understanding that there are other countries that may not have the same amount of resources, and we have to honor that. And we have to make sure that we are directing those resources to those countries that are trying with everything that they have to be positioned to make sure that, they are addressing the needs that are coming from the climate crisis, but also that we are helping them along with those countries like the United States to understand there's huge opportunities around advanced manufacturing. There are literally going to be millions and millions and millions of jobs that are created that we have to make sure that there is equity in that process and that they are going to the global south as well as some of the other countries that have actually played a much greater role in the impacts that are happening now from our burning of fossil fuels and our connections to carbon.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really interesting point is that when we talk about environment and social justice, is that climate change actually disproportionately affects the marginalized and certain groups of people more so than, let's say, the mainstream population. So really thinking through from a policy point of view, not just in terms of decarbonization or zero net, is thinking through the implication to certain fragile segments of the population that we need to address. Any specific recommendation or guidance there?
Well, one of them that I often share with folks, and leaders taught me this years ago, is that we have to really deal with the, not just the symptoms of what's going on, but we got to get to the root causes of how we got to this. So if you look at our most vulnerable communities, especially in the United States, and I've worked outside the United States, that, we place our coal-fired power plants, our petrochemical facilities, all these other greenhouse gas emitting, industries in our most vulnerable communities and the places where, no one else wants these types of things. So we've got to address that. We've also got to address, our infrastructure issues, the pipelines. And here in the United States, there's 2.4 million miles of pipeline. And we run that through our most vulnerable communities, through indigenous land, through low-income white communities' lands, in many instances ending in people of color along the Gulf Coast. So we've got to have policy that understands, as we're making this transition, that we're also addressing those impacts that are going on. I think there are a myriad of things that we can do. One of them is making sure that we're honoring the Paris Climate Accord. I mean, that's just the basics. When we're not doing that, then we're not serious about these issues. There are a number of cities across the planet who are really got some great policies in place. We need to be mirroring those and helping to expand those into other places. And again, a lot of that is going to be tied to resources and capacity building. And we've got to be willing to, as I often say, share the wealth to make this change that's going to be necessary.
So real practical insights and recommendations by Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, who is the VP of Environmental Justice, Climate and Community Revitalization for the National Wildlife Federation. Thank you for joining, Mustafa.
Thank you, and continue the great work.